Hello, this is another video describing the state of the project, the Realm Builder, is what I'm calling it, I guess, RotMG Builder. I thought it deserved an update video because I promised that I would have it done ages ago. Okay, so if I launch it up now, and just wait for it to actually open because it has a lot of stuff to do before it displays anything. Couple things first. You can see now you can actually click around to navigate, and it now has every item. It has every item because it is pulling from the server to get the items, rather than being items like coded in by hand now, which is a substantial improvement, obviously. That's why they look worse, because they're not outlined anymore. These are just from the sprite sheet. But that makes it so that you can just not update this every time there's a server-side update, because they push those all the time. So I'm happy I got this working in the way it is. So doing this actually has substantially increased the amount of time it takes to run the optimize buttons, because it has so many more things to think about in every slot. So the number of possibilities has increased dramatically. So I optimized it a little bit. It still takes a lot longer, even though the program is better than it once was. One thing else that's here that you can see is I now have an option to scale the graph differently. So for instance, if you put in just the DPS set for Wizard, you can see it goes up here. If you click this checkbox here, then it scales the lowest value to be towards the bottom of the graph and the highest value to be towards the top of the graph, rather than only scaling the highest value. So this can show you some closer differences between builds. So if you look at this, I mean, it's not much of a difference. I didn't actually fine-tune the graph fit that much, but you know, it's more of an option than you had before. Another thing that is different is you can now add the temporary stat boosts. So if you want to use compare the DPS of the Cloak of Bloody Surprises to other cloaks, you can put it in like this. Oh, by the way, also, you might be wondering how I'm inputting this. I've actually changed how you interact with the program a bit. So now you can use the scroll wheel to up and down the text, up and down the fields. Just because clicking back and forth for numbers that can get that big is just a pain. So this is better. I don't know if it's the best solution, but you know. So you can see how much of a difference 25 attack makes on Rogue. It's a fair amount because it's a low DPS class to begin with. You can compare the new ST tome here and weigh it against the Tome of Holy Furor, which gives 15 dex. And you can compare that all against no boost, and you can see sort of the 1, 2, 3 here. It's got the plus 20 down here and the plus 15 over here, just so you keep track of what build has what. Ability DPS is something that I mentioned in the previous video. It's not in the this version of the program, because I went and, you know, I'm pulling everything from the live server now, and I could not, for the life of me, find the Wizmod data in the documentation anywhere. It's there somewhere, but I couldn't find it. So I didn't have a way to properly tie in the content in this program with the content that's actually currently in the game, which is, just I wanted to do that, so I decided to just put that aside for now. One thing also, speaking of things that get pulled from the live server, the ST set bonuses are now pulled from the live server. And they are viewable by clicking on the ST over here. And you can see it tells you whether it's active or not and what stats are being given by the whole this box of information here. And it works for the alien sets too, which I didn't mention this in the previous videos, but the alien sets were not in there because I hadn't programmed it to detect them properly. Where's the alien rope? Here it is. So you can see it doesn't do anything there, but if I add an alien core, you can even see it on the UT gear, even though it doesn't have the little indicator that you can. So you can toggle this on and off to see whether you want to view it or not. So the alien set bonuses are up and running. This actually, amusingly, again, changes what is the best stats on certain classes. On the wand classes, the maximum achievable def is higher than the ones that I found before, because the alien blue core just gives a ton of defense. You can see 5, 10, it gives 15 between them. And I used this menu before. This is where all the optimized stuff is now. You might have noticed that there's some other stuff on the screen that I didn't mention the first time I opened this menu. So I added a few more things. So you can maximize the product of 2 stats if you want to have 2 things going, like HP and defense maybe. It gives the same build, I suppose. But say speed and defense. And it gives something different with very low DPS. So that's a new option, and then you can say maximize damage per shot or rate of fire. These are both pretty useless, but I just wanted to add more options because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to have aside from maximize stat or product of 2 stats. So maximize damage per shot. It's kind of silly, but it's just a extra inclusion. So you can get whatever big number on Samurai for damage per shot with the Blade of Ages, even though that has really terrible DPS. And then what else is in this menu? Rate of fire. Again, it's kind of not that useful, but I wanted something else to maximize. True range of at least XYZ. So that actually implies something that is here, which is a crappy little true range calculator. It's not that good, so don't swear by it or anything, because it doesn't take into account amplitude or any weird bullet effects. But if the bullets fly straight, the number will be correct. Or it'll be mostly correct. It's missing a few things. I just tossed this together because I wanted a condition. So you can see the true range of the tiered bows, 3.5-ish. C-bow is 5-ish. There's all sorts of stuff. One thing it doesn't do is, I think I use the exact same formula that I reverse engineered as the Piffle calculator, because it also spits out 0 for the Staff of Unholy Sacrifice, which is just not true. But this would actually be easy to fix, but I'm not gonna, for reasons I'm gonna get into later. And then you can set a floor for any stat if you want it to be at least whatever. You want to have as much DPS as possible without sacrificing too much health. So what's the best DPS with at least however much health? So you can have constraints on it. And if you take the constraint off and you run it again, you get a different set. And then the DPS must be at least whatever at all defense. I think in the next version I'm going to change this to be at the current defense, because that is probably a more important thing to consider. But it's at all defense. So if you are looking at like a pixie sword build that drops off really, really hard at high defense, you could say, no, it's got to be at least 1500 at all defense. And then, this is going to give me, yeah, so it doesn't give you pixie sword build, because that is below that at that very high defense. And all defense is all defense that it calculates, which means only up to 150. But you can see 1500 somewhere like here, and at high defense it's below that. So this is sort of whatever. These three constraints are interesting. You can see these little radio boxes down here that let you change what item set you're using. This one actually doesn't do anything, but I programmed it because I was expecting to write something that would make it do something, but it doesn't. Anyway, tradable items does work though. So the best tradable item DPS is, there's no tradable DPS armor or shield. But you can see that that's sort of an interesting one. Tradable, DPS, wizard, and it'll only make a build with tradable items. So I think that's a neat one. My items is something I was planning to implement in inventory that's stored here locally. I didn't do that. Again, there's a lot of things I was planning to do that I didn't do. And ultimately, that is because I've decided to probably rewrite this entire program. Which is, it's something I've been thinking about for a minute. I mentioned it in one of my earlier videos. This is written in Java, which is causing some issues with my ideas of sharing this with people. So I'm gonna abandon it at this point. In its current state, I'm gonna leave it alone and then redo it in a form that can be hosted on a website, I guess using JavaScript or something, I don't know. But I actually haven't touched this program since like a week beyond the last video I made about it. I decided it was probably time to put something up, let the people know that there's any people listening to this when I don't post the link to Reddit, which I'm not going to do for this one. Anyway, I got all the hard stuff out of the way, I suppose, in terms of writing the program. I have to, write the whole thing again, but what I struggled with most was the logic and understanding how to make things relate to each other, because I'm not like an advanced programmer or anything. So since I've figured out how to logically put things together, I won't waste time on certain threads that I abandoned. Ultimately, programming it is going to go probably smoother, even though it's in a programming language or style or scheme or whatever that I haven't touched before. So, I mean, we'll see how it goes. But the upshot of all this is I'm not releasing this. I actually tried to package it as a jar and it didn't work. You can see that this is when I run it from the IDE, and this is when I run it from the jar, which is something I never tried doing before. But every input-output operation doesn't work when I do this. So anytime I'm trying to read from a file of any kind, so it doesn't load images, and it doesn't load anything from the web. So it is basically useless because I am inexperienced in terms of doing this. So I don't have something ready to share. But it shouldn't be an issue with packaging it or whatever when I go to hosting it on a website directly. So I think this is probably for the best, the way that things have gone. Besides, posting a download link is kind of sketchy since you don't really know me. So ultimately, this is going to take another while before I have anything to show for it publicly. But it's going to be good. It's going to happen. I swear it, guys. It's going to happen. Thank you for your patience. I'll post another video soon, though whether it's related to the program or not remains to be seen.